Picture it before it happens, the way most people do. A single dramatic moment where everything changes at once. A phone call, a deal, a number that flips your entire life over in an instant. That's not how it happens. Nobody tells you that becoming rich isn't a moment. It's a sequence of small, almost invisible shifts, each one changing something quieter than your bank account. Most people stop watching after the part where the money shows up. They miss everything that happens before it and almost everything that happens after. So let's go through the stages nobody actually talks about, the ones that happen in silence, long before anyone else notices anything at all. You're sitting at your kitchen table, calculator app open, rewriting the same budget for the third time this month, trying to find $80 that simply doesn't exist anywhere in your numbers. You're not lazy. You're not bad with money. You're just out of room, the exact same amount coming in every month regardless of how carefully you rearrange it. A bill you forgot about quietly drafts itself from your account, and you watch the balance drop below a number you'd rather not look at directly. You call customer service, and the hold music loops the same 16 seconds over and over, like the system itself has given up trying to sound sympathetic. When someone finally answers, they read from a script. Polite, distant, clearly speaking to the 40th person today with the exact same problem you have. Here's the part nobody admits out loud. At this stage, your biggest enemy isn't spending too much. It's having no margin at all. So every unexpected expense doesn't feel like an inconvenience. It feels like a small emergency. You go to bed that night doing math in your head instead of sleeping, and somewhere in that exhaustion, without realizing it, a decision quietly starts forming. You open a notes app on your phone and start writing down every single purchase, not because a book told you to, but out of something closer to desperation, a need to actually see where the money disappears to every month. The first week feels almost embarrassing, watching small charges add up in ways you never noticed before. A coffee here, a subscription there. Nothing dramatic on its own, but undeniable once it's all written down in one place. You skip a dinner out with friends telling them you're just tired, and one of them, without meaning any harm, jokes that you've gotten boring lately. A comment that stings more than it should. You don't correct them. You just smile and let it pass, carrying a strange, private kind of loneliness that comes from making a decision nobody else around you understands yet. A small amount, the first real amount, lands in a savings account you swore you'd actually leave alone this time. And you check it more often than you'd like to admit. Not from greed, but from disbelief that it's actually still there. The deeper truth surfacing here is one nobody warns you about. Discipline, in its early stages, looks identical to deprivation to everyone watching from the outside. And you have to be willing to look slightly worse off to other people before you actually start being better off yourself. You read something somewhere about compound interest, and for the first time, the concept stops being an abstract idea in a textbook and becomes something you actually understand applies to you. You move a small amount into an investment account, not much, but enough that watching the market news on your phone suddenly feels personal in a way it never did before. The market drops one ordinary afternoon, and you feel a flicker of real fear, completely disproportionate to the actual dollars involved, the first time money you can't control starts controlling your mood instead. A coworker mentions almost dismissively that stocks are basically gambling, a comment delivered with total confidence by someone who has never actually opened an investment account in his life. You don't argue. You just nod, quietly aware that you've started learning a language most people around you have strong opinions about without ever having spoken a single word of it themselves. Here's the uncomfortable insight settling in at this stage. Most financial advice you receive from people close to you isn't actually about money. It's about their own fear, projected confidently in your direction as if it were wisdom. You hit a number in your savings that finally creates real breathing room. 3 months of expenses sitting quietly in an account you've promised yourself not to touch. The first thing you notice isn't a purchase. It's the absence of something. The 3 a.m. anxiety spirals you used to have about worst-case scenarios simply stop showing up, like a house guest who finally left without you noticing the exact moment they walked out. A friend going through a sudden job loss calls you, not for advice on saving, just to talk through the panic. And you realize with quiet surprise that you're now the calm voice in someone else's financial emergency, a role you didn't apply for but somehow grew into. At work, rumors of layoffs spread through your department, and you watch your coworkers' faces tighten with a fear you remember intimately but no longer feel yourself. An unsettling kind of distance that makes you feel slightly guilty for the relief underneath it. You don't mention your savings to anyone, partly out of humility, partly out of a strange instinct that announcing it would somehow change how people treat you before you're even sure you want that change. The realization crystallizing here is rarely said aloud. Financial security doesn't remove fear from your life, it just relocates it from your own situation into empathy for everyone else still standing where you used to stand. You get a raise, a real one, the kind that actually changes the math instead of just adjusting it slightly, and the first thing you do isn't celebrate, it's quietly increase the amount moving into savings before you can get used to spending the difference. A relative, hearing about the raise secondhand, makes an offhand comment about how you must be doing pretty well now, delivered with a tone that's somewhere between pride and quiet resentment, impossible to fully untangle. You notice your spending habits barely change at all, and a strange, almost confusing emotion surfaces, a kind of disappointment in yourself for not feeling more excited about something you worked toward for years. At a dinner with old friends, you instinctively reach for the check, and nobody objects the way they used to, a small shift in dynamic that nobody mentions out loud but everyone clearly notices. You realize somewhat uncomfortably that lifestyle inflation isn't really about greed. It's about the quiet social pressure to spend in proportion to what people now assume you're earning, even when your actual goals haven't changed at all. The deeper truth surfacing here is one nobody prepares you for. Resisting the urge to spend more, once you finally can, requires a different, quieter kind of discipline than the one that got you here in the first place. You cross into a category where your investments alone generate more in a single month than your entire paycheck did a few years earlier, a fact you calculate twice, certain you've made some kind of arithmetic mistake. There's no notification for this, no congratulations, just a number sitting quietly on a screen, indifferent to how long you waited to see it appear. A financial advisor, someone you never contacted, reaches out unprompted, offering a complimentary consultation, and you realize with a small jolt that some invisible threshold has just classified you into a tier worth someone else's attention. At a family gathering, an older relative who once gently warned you about wasting money on stocks now asks seriously what you think he should do with his own retirement account, a complete reversal that neither of you mentions directly. You answer carefully, aware that something between you has quietly shifted, the dynamic of advice now flowing in the opposite direction than it used to. The uncomfortable insight settling in here is one most people discover too late to fully appreciate. Respect in financial conversations rarely arrives through explanation. It arrives the moment someone senses you've already solved a problem they're still quietly struggling with. You're sitting in your car after a long day, and you do the math almost by accident, calculating that your passive income alone now covers every essential expense in your life. Completely, without requiring a single additional hour of work. You don't quit your job that day. You don't tell anyone. But something shifts immediately in how you sit through stressful meetings. A kind of detached calm that other people start to read as confidence, even though it feels internally more like indifference toward outcomes that used to terrify you. Your manager notices the change before you've said a single word about it, and starts including you in decisions with a tone that feels less like instruction and more like a conversation between equals. A friend asks how you're staying so relaxed about a decision that would have terrified you a year earlier, and you struggle to explain that it isn't confidence exactly. It's distance. The strange peace of knowing the worst-case outcome no longer threatens your entire foundation. The realization crystallizing here is one of the quietest truths in this entire journey. Financial freedom rarely arrives as a single dramatic moment. It arrives as a slow accumulation of ordinary Tuesdays that simply stop feeling like emergencies one at a time, until you finally notice the pattern. You finally tell someone the actual numbers, carefully, almost testing the words out loud for the first time, and their reaction surprises you, not excitement, but a strange recalculation in their expression, as if they're mentally repositioning exactly where you now belong in their understanding of the world. A distant acquaintance starts liking everything you post online within minutes of you posting it. A small, almost comedic confirmation of a pattern you'd suspected but never confirmed until now. At work, a major project fails, the kind of failure that used to keep you awake rehearsing apologies in your head. And instead you move through the consequences with a calm that visibly confuses your coworkers, who don't realize the failure no longer threatens your survival, only your pride. An old friend reaches out after years of silence, warm, nostalgic, the conversation eventually drifting toward a business opportunity they'd love your thoughts on, and you recognize the pattern before the message even finishes loading. Here's the uncomfortable truth surfacing at this stage, the one almost nobody says out loud. Once people sense you've actually become wealthy, their attention toward you increases sharply, while their honesty with you, almost without exception, quietly decreases at the exact same rate. You're sitting across from a wealth advisor, discussing strategies that didn't exist in your vocabulary a few years earlier, structuring conversations not around growth anymore, but around protection, a shift in language that mirrors a shift happening somewhere deeper inside you. He mentions almost casually certain options available at your level, a phrase that quietly confirms something you've suspected for a while, that there's an entire tier of financial strategy invisible to anyone who hasn't crossed this specific, unspoken threshold. At a dinner with old friends, you notice yourself avoiding certain topics entirely, not out of secrecy, but out of a new awareness that even casual comments about money now land differently than you intend them to. A relative going through a difficult financial stretch calls, not to ask for money, just to talk, treating you, almost without realizing it, as a kind of emotional safety net simply because of what your resources represent in their mind. You reassure them with more confidence than you actually feel inside, performing a calm you're still in some private way, learning to fully believe yourself. The uncomfortable truth crystallizing here is rarely spoken aloud. Wealth doesn't just change your decisions, it quietly recasts you, in the eyes of nearly everyone around you, into a role you never actually auditioned for. You're at a small kitchen table again, except it's not yours this time. It belongs to someone you're visiting, a young relative rewriting the same budget for the third time this month, searching for $80 that simply doesn't exist anywhere in the numbers. You recognize the exact posture immediately, the tight shoulders, the calculator app open, the quiet exhaustion of math that refuses to work out no matter how it's rearranged. You don't lecture them. You don't hand them a spreadsheet. You just sit down quietly and start asking questions. The same patient, curious questions nobody ever asked you back when you were sitting exactly where they are now. And in that single ordinary moment, the entire shape of everything you've gone through finally becomes clear. Becoming rich was never really about the number eventually appearing on a screen somewhere. It was about a long, quiet sequence of decisions nobody else could see, each one trading a small amount of comfort today for a kind of freedom that doesn't announce itself until years later. Nobody claps. Nobody notices most of it happening in real time. But one day, you're the calm person at someone else's kitchen table. And that, more than any number ever could, is the actual proof that something in you finally quietly changed.